What is your biggest I didn't think this through moment? When I was younger, I was holding one of our cats in my arms like a baby and petting him, as I would frequently do. He was pretty happy. Then it occurred to me that it would be hilarious to blow a raspberry on my cat's tummy. When I did, the cat latched onto my face with all 4 paws and just held on with its claws. It was at this point that I realized I had not thought this through. I was considering my options. Either drop the cat and let him take my face with him, or just wait until the cat let go. I ended up standing there, bent over with the cat latched onto my face for about 20 seconds or so before he finally let go and I was able to put him down. Needless to say, I learned my lesson. See, reading stuff like this makes me happy that I've messed with my cat since he was 8 weeks old. He lets me do everything. I can mess with his toes, clip nails, put eye drops in, clean ears, pull little hairs out because they sometimes gets in his ears. I've done the raspberry thing about 100 times and he just lays there in my arms staring at me. I volunteered to chaperone a Boy Scout event with my son. It was a caving expedition. It included a 100-yard belly crawl. That didn't sound very far. I didn't think it through. I found out that day I'm claustrophobic. During the 100-yard belly crawl, your head would bump the ceiling of the cave and your arms could touch both walls easily. You have to drag yourself with your elbows and try to push with your legs. I started to mentally freak out. Couldn't breathe. Was really starting to panic. It was only then that I realized 100 years was a football field and those are luoning. The only way I kept it together was to remember that there was a bunch of 12-year-old boys in front and behind me, including my son. If I had a panic attack and freaked, it could be bad. If I had a heart attack and died, it would be bad. So I made it out. The guide saw how pale and sweaty I was and asked me if I was okay. I said sure. I made it through. The rest of the cave is all standing and then we are out. He said, oh no, we have to go back out that way. I said, but this is a through and through cave, in one end and out the other. He said it was, but around 6 months ago, the other end collapsed. We are just going to walk around for 2 hours and then we go back out this way. That was perhaps the longest 2 hours of my life. Did not think it through. Will never go into a cave again. I won't even describe what happened when a bat decided to attach itself to the back of my jacket on the way out. Props for not inciting a panic among the kids. Shot an arrow straight up in the air and lost sight of it. My roommate and I did this with a crossbow we bought at the flea market. I still remember us both losing sight of the bolt, looking down at each other, sharing the terrifying realization of what we just did, and then sprinting in opposite directions. Eating a ghost pepper with 3 of my other good friends. I love those guys and the video was hilarious. But dear god, it was so hot. I'm not accustomed to hot foods, and it completely annihilated my stomach. I felt like I was crapping fire. I was throwing rocks trying to hit the metal thing on top of the chimney. As I am on my about 105th rock, my dad comes out all pee telling me I just broke something out front. Crap, there are cars out there, I thought, and I ran out front. I didn't see anything and went back inside. My mom woke up and had to go to work. She goes into her new Nissan Murano and opens up the sunroof shade and broken glass falls everywhere. I tried this once apart from I was like 7 and couldn't throw very far. Went straight through my next door neighbor's window. I'll preface this by saying I was 14. I stayed over at a friend's house and forgot to bring my contact lens solution. My thinking was, saline is kinda salty, right? So I put my lenses in a cup mixed with water and salt. The next morning when I put one of them in. That's okay. I was so drunk I slept with my contacts in but wanted to rinse them in the morning only to find out, after putting one in, that I used the peroxide solution and not normal saline. I literally could hear a sizzle as it latched onto my eye. Don't worry, my eye still works many years later. I was in grade 2. The teacher asked who knew how to dance. There were a couple of girls who took dancing lessons. Back then they were the little girls with curly ringlets and skirts always that bit shorter than the rest of us wore. For goodness knows what reason I stuck up my hand too. The teacher told me to come up to the front of the class and demonstrate. I hadn't a clue what to do, so I kind of pranced around for a few embarrassing moments until she told me to go back to my seat. I definitely hadn't expected her to make me prove it. I know how to dance. It's all about moving your body in time to the music. Doesn't mean I can do it to save my life. When I was 15, I went to a summer school program. Some kid said he'd pay me $50 to bring a screwdriver to school and unscrew all of the outlets and leave them hanging out, exposing ground wire. As stupid as I was, and as I was only trying to fit in, I did it. I got away scot-free though. Thank God. One thing I'll never do is listen to someone who's taller than me. Don't know about biggest, but a pretty big one. Driving around Icicle Lake in Kyrgyzstan trying to find a spot to camp. You can camp basically anywhere. In spring, we are mainly on farmland dirt tracks, and so rainwater has pooled in dips in the track. Have successfully forded several, and coming to a new one think no problem. I got this. Vroom. Plunge into the water and gradually lose traction until we're basically at a standstill. Frick. Throw it into reverse. Gun it. Back into first. Gun it. Basically nothing. I'm faced with having to call the rental company and explain to them that I'm sitting on the roof of their car. That I wasn't really meant to take off-road, in a hole in the middle of a field. I regretted everything in that moment. I did that with one of my Jeeps. I sank a good 4 feet at the deepest part. Always test the hole. I had shaved, but at my work I saw there was still one hair left to the side of my mouth. I tried burning it off with a lighter and instead burned off half my eyelashes. So on one side my eyelashes were half their normal length. Dude. Tweezers. I was at a performing arts summer camp. Some people there got the chance to put on a show for the rest of the camp at the end of the trip. On the day of the big performances, there was a girl sobbing saying her friend backed out and wouldn't perform with her. She asked if I knew the lyrics to Celine Dion's My Heart Will Go On, and begged me to sing while she played the music. She looked really upset and I thought I could half-ass it, so I agreed. Thought it'd be easy. Turned out I only knew one line of lyrics, which were also wrong. So, I sang every night in my dreams. I see you, I see you, that is how I know you. Go on over and over, while the other girl sobbed while playing the recorder, in front of 100 or so other kids and camp leaders. Most cringe-worthy experience from my childhood. TL. DR lied about knowing Celine Dion lyrics. Learned never to lie about knowing Celine Dion lyrics. When we were playing tag, and I ran across the road so I wouldn't get tagged. Yeah, kids, don't do that. Having a car smash your leg doesn't hurt, but you'll really wish you hadn't done that. My cousin, and my uncle all thought it would be interesting to see a firecracker explode in water and watch, since the fuses were chemical and still went down even in water. It only took about a second after we dropped it into a glass jar that I had the thought, what if it breaks the glass? Sure enough. Pop and glass splinters and tiny partials everywhere. 3 people couldn't put that together that this was a dumb idea. When I was around 3, before I could swim, I was playing in the shallow end of my uncle's pool. Now, like any curious child, a question popped into my head. At what point of the pool would the water be over my head? So I went and tested it out. One careful step after another careful step, trying to make sure I knew the exact moment where standing was no longer an option for me. Well, I never thought about what would happen when I eventually reached the point of no return, and, well, I got there. So, I started to drown. Now here's the thing about drowning. You can't call for help. The water chokes you. Nowhere to make noise can come out. There I was, trying to scream for help and no one could hear it. Apparently, my uncle saw me and thought I was fine because I wasn't making any noise. Lucky for me, my mom knew drowning is a silent killer and snatched me from the clutches of my stupidity. My little league days ended when my coach threw me into the deep end at a pool party when he wasn't aware I couldn't swim. I remember trying to get up and everyone just watching and nothing happening, and it gets darker. My dad finally noticed, grabbed me, and we left a little bit later. When I was a kid, I got hungry and figured I'd heat up a frozen pizza in the oven. I didn't take the plastic wrap off the pizza before cooking it. 0/10, would not eat or breathe its fumes again. I know this is very mundane. One time when I moved, I decided to pack and load everything myself. Never again. It took 6 days. Also, it is very hard to move a couch solo. snowboarding out of bounds in an area where I didn't know the mountain. That should be enough, but it gets worse. So much fresh powder and it's awesome. And then suddenly I'm going off a cliff. I know better than to not pay attention to the terrain, but I got lost in the moment. I dust myself off and chastise myself for being an idiot. I keep going down the mountain and get to a cliff chute. It's pretty narrow, not much room for error, and it's the only option for moving forward. I hear some noise behind me and a skier comes up to me. He's French and speaks with a heavy accent. He apparently followed me because he assumed I was local and he was freaking about this cliff chute we had to navigate. There was no room to carve really, so I dropped down and then waited for him to come out. He dropped in and sort of speed wobbled tumbled out. Didn't plow into the rock walls though. Nobody was hurt, but I really should not have done that alone. To start, and without knowledge of the mountain. For the chute cliff, it was clearly above my skill level, and I'm pretty decent. Could have been much worse. On the bright side, you looked like you knew what you were doing. I was in charge of planning and directing a 5K, so I reserved the location, created the race route, talked to the local companies to invite them to table at our event, got sponsors for the prizes for runners, and talked to food companies to give us fruit and food for the day of for runners. Created an itinerary for where everyone needed to be and what they needed to do by the hour. Logistics wise, it was spotless and I thought everything through. Until a runner comes up to me on race day while we are setting up and asks, "Excuse me, where are the porta potties?" Crap. Working on a laser printer, I was taking it apart and wanted to understand what the different boards did. I was like 15, so I plugged them in one at a time to see what changed. While the printer was plugged in, there are spots on the power board that are live at 1000 plus volts. My left hand touched one of them while my right was holding onto the metal case. It took me about 5 seconds to realize what happened because the shock put me offline for a moment. Pretty sure I very nearly died. The shock came from a capacitor, could easily have given a lethal pulse. When I was about 9, I was grounded. Really bad grounded where even all of my books were taken away from me. So I'm sitting bored in my room, and I see a DC adapter plugged into the wall, without anything attached. I licked it. That was a heck of a bad plan. Driving down a very narrow street with cars lining each side, maximum of a foot clearance either side. The road dead ends. This road is, for clarity, completely new to me. What's also important is I'd only been driving for about a month and a half, so was not yet confident as to how much space I need etc etc. See a spot where I could maybe have turned around. It would have been super tight, so decide to keep going, figuring there would be turning space at the end of the road, since other people have to get in and out of here, right? And plenty of cars were facing the opposite direction, so they must have gone to the end of the road and turned around to be parked facing that way. So I trundle on down and discover to my horror that while there is a turning space, everyone has used it as additional parking. So I have far less space to turn here than I would have had I taken the uncomfortably tight space previously available. So I had to make what must have been approaching a 50-point turn. It took me 40 minutes and I was crying from stress within 10. Oh, and I had an audience of about 10 people, which really helped. But I didn't hit anyone's car, so I suppose it could be classed as a success. What jackasses. Thought someone would have at least directed you or took over. But you might not have been the first only one to have trouble with that. Hopefully that makes you feel better. 11 years old. Took a wooden baseball bat and swung against one of those large bouncy balls to try and smack it some distance. It didn't move, but the bat swung back perfectly into my mouth and hit my front permanent tooth out in one clean piece. I spit it into my hand and wondered for a second why it didn't look like any of the other teeth I'd lost, but instead had a large cone-shaped top to it, the root. I went inside to tell my mom, and I only started crying when I thought about how I was going to look like a toothless hillbilly the rest of my life. I guess I can tell people I play hockey. I remember sobbing. My mom called a family member who was a dentist, and they instructed her to put the tooth in some milk and haul butt to the dentist. I remember being slightly annoyed that we had to leave because Doug had just come on TV and I wanted to watch. We got to the dentist and he was able to put the tooth back in, scrape off the back and pack it with some filling. I had to go back every 3 months for a year and have this redone. And for the first 6 or so months I had to wear a wire across my top row to hold the tooth in. At the year mark, I had a root canal done and have had no issues since. TLDR. Swung baseball bat at bouncy ball, but bounced back and smacked out my front tooth. When I was 15 I had the amazing idea to build a cannon out of PVC pipe, Gorilla Glue, and duct tape, and use a crushed up model rocket engine as gunpowder. Thankfully it didn't explode, but it did send a ball bearing hurtling at terminal velocity into the park across the street and sound like a rifle going off in a residential neighborhood. So it worked. My sister had an exam on a weekend a few years back and she was worried because she had no one to babysit her children for about 5-6 hours. My parents were out of town and her husband was driving her to the exam, which was about 2 hours away. I decided to help her out and told her I'd take care of them. One of them was an extremely mommy attached 4-year-old and the other an even more attached 2-year-old. They were calm for about 14.2 seconds before the wailing began. Spent the next 5 or so hours convincing them that my sister will be here any second now while trying my best to calm them down. Didn't work. It was my junior year of high school and I finally had a girlfriend to ask to prom. I wanted to ask her in a memorable and romantic way but had no idea how to accomplish that. One day I was watching TV, probably MTV, and saw a guy ask a girl to prom by using candles that spelled out prom. I thought that was a genius idea. So I got to work. This is when the not thinking it though part happens. Instead of candles I decided I was going to pour gasoline on her road and light it on fire. I waited for a night that her parents would be gone and she was home alone. I drove to her house, parked my car down the street and walked with my full gas can to her house. I poured the whole can out to write prom on the road in front of her house and proceeded to try and light it on fire. Of course it wasn't that easy. I finally got somewhat of a flame going on each letter and ran to ring her doorbell so she could open up the door to see this flaming message. Of course when a teenage girl is home alone and gets a surprise doorbell ring she is not going to immediately run to open the door. After 10 minutes of ringing the bell and running back to the road to try and light the message, I finally called her to tell her it was me at her door and to come outside. She finally appeared at the door, but instead of being happy and excited she was pee. All she said was, "You better have that cleaned up before my parents get home." Panic mode begins. After googling ways to clean gasoline off of pavement I go to the store to buy powdered laundry detergent and cat litter. I spread that crap all over her road and all that it did was make prom way more noticeable. I finally left after hours of trying to clean the road, hoping that her parents didn't notice it when they got home and maybe I could clean it better in the morning. Daytime hits and I go to check the damage. Let me tell you, it was 1000x worse in the daylight than it was at night. The only option I had was to confess to her parents. Luckily her dad was a cool guy and kind of just laughed it off but told me never to try and light anything on fire by their house again and also never show up while they're not there. That stain lasted for about 3 months after. Just a constant reminder of my stupidity. TLDR. Tried to ask my girlfriend to prom by pouring gasoline on her road and lighting it on fire. In year 8 we were doing a drama exercise where only 3 people would be on stage at any one time, but one had to be standing, one be sitting and one be on the floor. The whole class was there, and at any given moment a bystander could tap one of the performers to switch place with them. In the scenario, there was a girl pretending to be pregnant, when suddenly she erupted in labor. SJ laid to the floor and spread her legs claiming she was about to give birth. None of the other 2 participants interacted with her, I think out of awkwardness. So I took it upon myself to do so. I tapped the participant standing and entered the exercise. I walked up to the girl in labor and said, "Don't worry young woman, I'm a doctor," whilst rolling up my sleeves and getting really close to her spread legs. The whole crowd, which were laughing, suddenly went silent, and the girl pretending to be in labor just stopped and went wide-eyed. Everyone was looking at me. I must have looked like I was really put my hands down there. I just froze what seemed like eternity. I had no idea how to carry on this daring act, so we both remained there in silence, with her legs to the side, and me creepily bedding at the waist with my hands out towards her, until her friend ran and tagged herself in, and I walked in silence back to the rest of the class. I still cringe at the moment. TL. Doctor drama class. I isn't sufficient training to become a midwife. I helped my friend's family put together a metal fire pit and stayed and had the first fire in it with them. I wanted to take the lid off the pit and put more wood on, but I couldn't find the fire poker. I thought, meh, I'll just do it quickly. It can't be too bad, right? So I pull it off and set it on the ground quickly and start putting wood on the fire. My friend, who was in his house, comes back and by then my fingers are starting to feel tingly. Turns out there was a nice dark line across the tips of 2 or 3 of my fingers. He drags my hand over to this pool and slams them into the water. But as we're walking over, I notice that the fire poker is under my arm. TLDR. Couldn't find the fire poker right under my arm. Got burned trying to lift the lid to the fire pit. Better than being drunk and trying to pick up something so hot it melts the skin of your fingertips and slides out of your grip, instantly hitting the ground. Then before the pain signals reach your brain, you bend over, confused, and try to pick it up once again. When I attended my first speed dating event, I decided to wing it with zero prepared material. Really nice day today. Fabulous. Sunshine. Who could ask for anything more? Am I right? Got my hit of vitamin D today. How about you? Excellent. Alright. Having fun tonight? Yes. Thank you. It's true. These events are amazing. Seattle sent its best and finest tonight. And you know, the ladies, they couldn't have been more gracious. It's been an amazing run. One of the most amazing runs ever. The ladies. Very, really, very nice. All of them. No mutual matches and the comment cards were vicious. One woman called me a faker and another said I was vacuous and just said whatever popped into my head. It was ride a bike to school day at my daughter's school, so we both did. I did not bring a lock for her bike. After dropping her off, I had my bike and her bike to get back home. I always have some rope on me, so I tied her bike to mine and quickly discovered that wasn't going to work. Then I tried picking up her bike and biking my own bike. Turns out I lack the strength and dexterity to do this. I admitted defeat and said, I didn't think this through loud enough that other parents might hear. See, AMD help. And one did. Took my daughter's bike and dropped it off at my house. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.